All right, so in just a second, we'll get started. Coming up, we'll be in conversation with Zach Manuel and Nick Aziz, but prior to that, we do have another presentation from a Southern artist that I'm really excited about and have been following for a while now online through a series of pixelated images. And this is all for the game Norco. So Norco is a sci-fi Southern Gothic adventure that immerses the player in the sinking suburbs and verdant industrial swamps of Louisiana's petrochemical hinterlands. It is the first game from the collective Geography of Robots, created by Norco, Louisiana-born-and-raised writer and designer Yuts. And now prior to its full release, the game won the inaugural Tribeca Games Awards at Tribeca Film Festival, and it has been lauded as a master of interactive storytelling by the Los Angeles Times, as well as one of the best written games of the year. So I'd like to go ahead and pass it over to the game's creator, Yuts, to share a little bit about Norco, and I'm so excited for you to see the imagery and hear a little bit about where all this came from. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, cool. I'm going to share my screen very quickly. I put together a short presentation. Let's see. And I apologize, I actually don't have a camera on this computer. So
that's all right, it works out.
Cool, great. All right, so, oh, that is not the right button. Yeah, well, whatever. All right, so let's see. And are y'all able to see the slideshow?
Yep, we're seeing it.
Great. Okay. Yeah, so I'm Yuts. I'm the founding member of the game development collaborative you had mentioned. It's called Geography of Robots. And we just released our first title called Norco, which is based on my hometown of Norco, Louisiana. And it's a kind of traditional point and click adventure game. It's pretty literary in style. It's got what you might say is interactive fiction elements to it. And for anyone who's familiar with the indie game space, it gets compared occasionally to recent titles like Kentucky Route Zero or Disco Elysium. And then if you're familiar with more traditional kind of like 90s conventional point and click adventure games, it has a lot of elements that are similar to that as well. But I actually was gonna discuss more the thematic elements of the game rather than the gameplay today. And a lot of the themes actually dropped in on the previous panel discussion. I think a lot of the themes will probably be familiar to a lot of people in attendance today. Things like Louisiana's geography, coastal erosion, residential displacement due to various things, disaster of various kinds, and other themes that I think anyone living along the Gulf Coast can identify with. And so the game is illustrated in pixel art. If you're familiar with a lot of iconic games like Mario or Mega Man or things like that, Sonic the Hedgehog, a lot of that was drawn in pixel art, but myself and the other artist, Jesse Jacoby, we wanted to kind of elevate that medium and apply a lot of different kinds of painterly and traditional painting techniques to it. And also kind of de-retrofy it. It's treated often as an anachronistic medium, but it is in a lot of ways a living medium, and it's been evolving since the origin of the medium. And so we wanted to highlight that and highlight the flexibility that you have when working with pixels. And so this is a illustration of Greater New Orleans. Some of the imagery is a little dark, but hopefully it shows through. But an illustration of Greater New Orleans at night, and it highlights kind of the way in which geospatial imagery plays a part in the game. So you'll use overworld maps like this to navigate between different locations around South Louisiana and Greater New Orleans. Let's see. And then this is another example of this. This is actually, for those familiar with the river parishes, this is the east bank of St. Charles Parish, about 25 miles upriver from New Orleans. You have in the foreground the Mississippi River, and then beyond that is the Shell oil refinery, which is bounded in green. In the game, it's actually called the Shield Oil Refinery. And then if you look a little further up, you see the margin of Lake Pontchartrain with some visible coastal erosion occurring. And then there's the Interstate 10 overpass that goes over the Bonnie Carey Spillway beyond that. But so a lot of this geospatial imagery is, you can infer a lot of the thematic elements of the game from this. The river is a motif that gets used often in the game. Petrochemical facilities and petrochemical infrastructure is explored and interrogated very deeply in the game. The impact that it has on the surrounding community, the impact that it has on the environment, on the built environment, land use patterns, housing, things like that. Those are all things that get discussed in the game as well. And this is another map that you navigate that shows various kinds of coastal erosion due to various kinds of mechanisms. So you've got pipeline canals, you've got dredging to build interstates. There are cypress logging canals, which are, you can identify them because of their radial pattern. And then what's highlighted in orange are what's called in the game ghost bayous. And these are bayous that have eroded to a point that the banks of the bayous are no longer visible. And so if you're attempting to navigate these areas, you need to know the historical boundary or the historical footprint of these bayous. Otherwise, if you're boating, you're going to run your prop over fallen cypress trees and things like that. And so coastal erosion and environmental degradation get used almost as mechanics, as gameplay mechanics in the game of Norco. And then this is a slide that I had picked actually out of the original presentation deck that I had given when a publisher had approached us about publishing the game. They asked if I could put something together to go over kind of the overall vision of the game. And this is one of the first ones I put together because it's first slides I put together because it's one of the most important themes, which is sprawling complexity and cascading disaster, the ways in which various kinds of infrastructure and zoning regulations and interstates and petrochemical facilities all intersect to create cascading and magnified disasters in Southeast Louisiana. That's something that gets touched on quite a bit in the game, the ways in which the different individual atomic elements of the built environment intersect and conspire to create devastation. And then another one, as I'd mentioned, is residential displacement. And you know, for those from South Louisiana, I think we're familiar with various kinds of residential displacement. Specifically in the river parishes are what some people may know as fence line communities, communities where an industrial facility has grown, where people become the unwitting neighbors of industrial facilities. The industrial facilities expand and it displaces residential areas. In a lot of cases, people will campaign for a buyout because they're living next to a facility, and the disamenities and the externalities of that facility will drive people away. And so a lot of times these industrial facilities will get a good bargain on the land for that case because people are so eager to leave. You know, you've got and this intersects with slavery in all kinds of different ways. But and so there's, you know, Diamond, Louisiana is a community in Norco that exhibits this. There's also Mossville in Southwest Louisiana that some people may be familiar with. And this diagram shows a community called Good Hope that's near Norco. And you can see between 1952 and the present day that the residential parcels of the community slowly disappear over time as people are bought out by the neighboring Shell Motiva facility until it's completely erased and the refinery essentially scabs over those residences. So this type of industrial residential displacement, these kinds of fence lines that become what's sometimes called in the literature X towns is something that gets explored fairly deeply in Norco. And that this is an illustration of an environment in Norco. It's a house. It's actually the protagonist's home, and residential areas and neighborhoods and homes are treated with a lot of reverence in the game because this displacement is happening, and homes are themselves these kind of incubators of culture. They have photo albums, they have recipe books, they're handed down intergenerationally, and they're a means of creating continuity of culture and also wealth accumulation and other things. So the home itself is so important to the fabric of a culture, and yet we're losing them. We lose them so often, and the land erodes and refineries displace them, and homes become, to a point where it happens so rapidly in some cases that it's like the built environment becomes somewhat fluid and disappears and erodes just like the land does. And so we really drill into that in the game, the sort of the way in which a home can dissolve as floods and the frequency of flooding increases and other things. And then the last theme I'll touch on is illness, which also, if you're from South Louisiana, especially if you're from the river parishes, I think illness and cancer is something you'll see very frequently. And one of the main protagonists of the game has metastatic cancer, is dying of metastatic cancer. And there's a scene in which you have a conversation where the illness is discussed, and there's a diagram that's animated in the game that illustrates the spread of cancer through the protagonist's body. And cancer in the game becomes symbolic of the way in which industry, infiltrates our lives, not only our neighborhoods, but on the most intimate biological level, becomes a part of us, becomes fused with us. And that's something that gets explored quite a bit. And this is another scene, another environment from the game that shows just a kind of a Louisiana cloudscape. And this was actually the first thing when I was teaching myself pixel art, the first thing that I wanted to get fairly accurate, as accurate as I could, are the cloudscapes of Louisiana, because I love them. And someone had remarked in the previous panel discussion, but something to the effect of, basically the beauty always shines through in Louisiana. Through all of this darkness, the beauty always shines through. And I think that is something we tried to communicate in Norco, that, you, in the midst of all of this hardship, you look up or you look around and you remember why you love this place and why it's why it's worth suffering for and why it's worth fighting for. So I wanted to include that as well. And if you want more information about the game, norcogame.com has links to social and some more information about the game and where you can download it and things like that. And that's all.
Thank you so much.
For sure.
Yeah, and I just want to say, this game is so rich with tone and emotion, and I'm really impressed by its writing and the level of research and expert knowledge, by lived experience that went into its creation. A lot of the themes that we've talked about today, like loss and preservation, are really prevalent here, and from what I've seen in the trailer, and plenty that we haven't gotten into, like illness and actual land loss and things that are really specific to Louisiana. So it's a beautiful culmination of ideas. Yeah, as Yamada says in the chat, I'm usually terrified to play video games because I just don't like the power that it gives me. But this one I've been really, really looking forward to. So she says, but I'm going to play this one, or they say, I'm going to play this one. If you're interested, we did drop a link to the game's website in the chat, and there was one on the screen there. But thank you so much.
Absolutely. No, it's an honor. Thank you.